On Friday, Federal Treasurer Wayne Swan slammed the door shut on Singapore's $8.4 billion takeover bid for the Australian Stock Exchange, bluntly stating it wasn't in the national interest. He didn't completely rule it out, though, saying he had an open mind about any future merger proposals. But clearly, though, any future proposals would need to see the ASX as the dominant partner. An interested observer to all this is Stuart Crosby, the boss of the world's largest share registry business, Melbourne-based Computershare. And as it happens, around the time the Singaporeans were being rebuffed, Computershare was buying an Italian registry business from the London Stock Exchange. It's all part of the frenetic global bourse trading going on at the moment. I spoke to Stuart Crosby just after the Treasurer outlined his reasons for knocking back the ASX deal on Friday. Stuart Crosby, do you think that the takeover of the ASX by the Singapore Exchange is against Australia's national interest?
I find it hard to see how it could be, Alan. I think that the Australian Exchange is a small market in world terms. It has nothing compelling to attract it to the other groups that are forming globally, and I think that without some step now that something with Singapore's on the table, that the risk is that it gets left out of the action over the next few years.
But have you heard Wayne Swan's reasons for this? It was basically around the prospect of Australia becoming a financial hub for Asia, or that's one of the main parts. But what do you think about that proposition?
It seems to me remarkable that the best way to become a hub in Asia is to push yourself away from it. Basically, that the opportunity to have connected to Asia through Singapore, which is one of the real entrepôts of Asia, which is one of the places...
Yeah, but the problem is that it involves Singapore taking over the ASX, not sort of the other way around, if you know what I mean.
Well, I mean, it's a public company wherever it is. People are excited about the Singapore sovereign stake within SGX. I think that would have been pretty diluted, and it doesn't vote anyway. Public companies are public companies wherever they are. I would have thought, I don't think that weighed particularly heavily with me. Obviously it did with others.
You've been involved in stock exchanges for a lot of your life. What is driving all of these groupings, these mergers among stock exchanges? Is it basically cost savings?
I wouldn't have thought so. I've been more sceptical than a lot of people I know about the benefits of exchange mergers globally. I think that if you look at Euronext, for instance, which rolled up a number of the Western European exchanges, there's been no rationalisation of trading systems. There's been no standardisation of rules across them. They still remain it still really remains a federation of different exchanges. NYSE, Euronext then merged, and the same thing happened. I don't think there's any dramatic cost savings. I think it is much more about being able to position to offer global services to issuers who want to act globally, rather than cost savings in domestic jurisdictions.
But is that a valid reason?
Well, it's certainly something Computershare's built its business on as well over the years. So we clearly believe that there are opportunities in that area. I do think that there will come a point, though, where the exchanges, as they form groups, no matter how strong or weak the P&L, profit and loss commercial logic of the mergers are, that those groups start to aggregate and to reinforce each other's businesses, and that organisations that aren't part of them will be left out of the developments that then occur.
Is there a difference in, as it were, sensitivity in all of these mergers, and including the Australian one, between the business of trading and the business of clearing and settlement?
I think that one of the things that have become very clear over the last 10 or 15 years as the alternative trading venues have developed is that settlement liquidity is a lot stickier and a lot harder to fracture than trading liquidity is. And so the exchanges that are vertically integrated, like Australia and Singapore and Hong Kong, are seen as having an entrenchment and a competitive advantage that the exchanges that don't control their own clearing and settlement infrastructure, like London or New York or NASDAQ or Toronto, have. So within Europe, really, it's only Deutsche Börse that managed to hang on to that integration, or actually buy it back effectively.
So look, if you were running the ASX, what would you do now? I mean, what are they? Are they now basically off the dance floor in terms of global mergers unless they are the bidder?
I think that has to be the case, doesn't it? It's very hard to see how any organisation would be prepared to run the risk of government, of not getting the government approval you need in the light of what's happened or what's happened over the last few months. I think that, having said that, ASX has a pretty strong franchise. I guess the area that worries me is that the strength of the Australian market, which has really been the resources sector, is clearly attractive to exchanges around the world. You see Hong Kong chasing resources listings quite aggressively. You see the Canadians and the London merger being predicated, I think, on creating a global resources forum to a significant extent. And I think ASX is going to have to play a pretty strong defensive game for a while.
Yeah, well, is that going to work, do you think? I mean, are they faced with the prospect of sinking slowly in the West as these other exchanges, more competitive, deeper liquidity, compete with them for listings?
I don't know. I think like when I think about issues like that in our own business, I think that there's no point trying to predict the future. What you do is you try and work out how you give yourself the best chance of succeeding and pursue that strategy, whether trying to work out what the probabilities are is a self-fulfilling prophecy, I suspect. I think you're better off saying we're going to prevail and this is how we're going to do it and getting on with it. It's obviously for commentators to sit back and assess the likelihood of that succeeding or not, but I don't think I wanted to get into that game.
So what about your business? Is it ex-growth now?
That is a question people ask. I think that if you look at us historically, most of our growth has been inorganic. It's been from buying things. We continue to buy things, we continue to look to buy things, we continue to have a strong balance sheet and a strong capacity to fund acquisitions. The challenge over the last few years, frankly, has been the lack of good prospects, which I think took us by surprise in the same way that it took a lot of acquisitive companies by surprise after the GFC, that there weren't more assets became available for sale in distressed circumstances than actually occurred. Since then, vendors have taken a while to settle down. The financial services groups that own a lot of the assets that appeal to us have been trying to work out what the new world means to them, whether it's the Basel III capital adequacy changes or whatever. I think that's now starting to become clearer, and certainly we've been telling people for a while that we see more opportunities now than we've seen for some time. You would have seen earlier this week we announced that we'd made a smallish acquisition in Italy. We bought a shareholder services business based in Turin called Servicio Titoli from the London Stock Exchange, which bought Borsa Italia a few years ago. So that's the first acquisition we've made for a while. There are a number of others that, as I say, we continue to work on.
And what about an acquisition outside the shareholder services area, a sort of a step change for your business? Have you considered, for example, buying a stock exchange?
If you cast your mind back 10 or 12 years, we were very interested in the futures exchange in Australia for a while. We had a business for a while that made the technology that stock exchanges use to trade securities. We sold that to OMX, and I became reasonably good friends with Magnus Bocker, who now runs the Singapore Exchange through that process. That's now owned obviously by Nasdaq OMX. We don't own that anymore, and I think we see other areas where our skills fit better than running stock exchanges. We've bought bankruptcy administration businesses in the US. We've got a corporate trust business in Canada. We administer some tax voucher schemes. There are a range of things like that where the business process architecture is very similar to what we do in our traditional shareholder services business that I think are more attractive to us.
Thanks for joining us, Stuart Crosby.
My pleasure, Alan.